Hey, you ever wonder why land is so expensive on the Big Island? I'm going to talk about that next and give you a couple suggestions on how we can fix it. Hey, aloha friends. Hey, one thing that we know for sure is that property on the Big Island is expensive. There's areas that aren't as expensive as others, but in general, land is pretty expensive, and especially housing. And so I wanted to put together some information to talk about why that is, and there's two main reasons for that, and they are the zoning makeup of the island and then ownership. So we're going to talk about that real quick. But first, the disclaimers. First thing is, all this information comes from the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, which is a mouthful, but it's a state department that tracks all of these economic data points and then puts them all together on a website. So I pulled this all off of that. I didn't make this stuff up. And each county is different. So these numbers are just for Hawaii County. They don't address Maui, Kauai, or Oahu, but this information is available if you wanted it. And the last thing is it's from 2007, so it's current up to 2007. So let's get into the slides here. First one is classification of land. So the State Land Use Commission classifies land into four big categories: conservation, agricultural, urban, and rural. And for the Big Island specifically, this is the breakdown of how many acres on the island are in each category. And the island has 2.5 million acres in total. But as you can see, the vast majority of that is in conservation and agricultural, which has very limited ability to have any type of development, housing, growth on top of it, especially conservation. And in agricultural are large tracts of land. So if you have a piece of land that's zoned ag 20 acres in agriculture, you can only build one house on it. So it keeps things very lightly populated. But rural is where urban is where most of that housing development takes place. And as you can see, 54,000 acres seems like a lot, but that's 2% of the overall landmass on the Big Island. So very little land is available for any type of housing, development, anything like that, building, just because of the classification of land use that we have. And so then the second issue is ownership. So these are the top 10 landowners on the Big Island. And the top 10 landowners own almost or a little over 2 million acres. So out of 2.5 million acres on the island, 2 million of that is owned by 10 landowners. And obviously the state, the federal government are the top two, but then Kamehameha Schools owns almost 300,000 acres on the island. And then you have Parker Ranch, the county government, and other large landholders that a lot of times own land throughout the state. But 10 people own 2 million out of 2.5 million acres on the island. And that's a big consideration because obviously these people have a lot of control over what happens on these lands, and that restricts the ability for other people to buy or to do any type of development or building on top of them. So second thing, major landowners. And then to kind of summarize about the numbers here so you can get a good snapshot of what we're dealing with. Owned by large landowners is 78% of the island. Conservation and ag is 98% of the island. Only 2% of the island is urban, and that's where most of housing and development comes into place. And then if you look at the population, this is an interesting number versus the number of land records. So how many pieces of land are available to purchase. You have 180,000 people on the island approximately, and 140,000 land records. So obviously the people that own land here don't all have to live here, but if you look at that ratio, there's very few available parcels of land compared to the population here. And obviously, if you know a little bit about economics, which I know enough to be dangerous because I went to college and that was my major, is that when the supply stays the same and demand increases, prices increase, and that's basically what we have here. And so solutions-wise, there's two main things that I think we need to really consider, especially being from here and local people need to consider, because a lot of times when you talk about development and land use, it's a scary thing to talk about because people don't want to see any more development. But my question always is we as a community have to have a discussion about what is an appropriate use of our land in terms of percentages. So is 2% enough? Because if you ask people, are we overdeveloped? And this happens every political cycle which we're coming up into. You poll the electorate and ask, is the island overdeveloped? 75% will say yes. And then if you ask the very next question, is affordable housing a problem? 85% will say yes. And there's a disconnect there, because you cannot say that we shouldn't have any more development, but then also say that we need more housing, because obviously the two go together. And so that's a major issue, is a lot of times the people that are elected who make land use policy, the county council, legislators in the state, reflect that attitude of no more development, too much development, and that restricts any possibility of us increasing the supply of housing, and will further drive up prices. It's a pretty simple situation. The second issue that we have is government itself, and this also goes back to policymakers. Over the years, we've developed so many policies that make it so difficult and so expensive to change tracts of land, even if it is zoned urban, into housing lots and then homes, that there is no incentive for people in the private sector to divide lands up and then make it available for housing that is affordable. Not affordable housing, but housing that is affordable, because of the environmental regulations, because of the infrastructure regulations. There's so many things that go into trying to make a piece of dirt available to build a home on, that the only way you can make money doing it is to build $1 million plus homes in the resort areas, because it becomes profitable when somebody can pay $2 million, because it costed so much for you to turn that piece of dirt into a buildable lot to build a home on, that there's no way you can build a home that normal people can afford and then sell it on the market for a price that will make you a profit, because obviously businesses have to make a profit. So there's a lot going on here, there's a lot to unpack, but something to really think about and consider when not only you vote, but when you just look at the land in general and prices. And if it's something that worries me is for the future is, how are my children going to live here if prices continue to go up the way they are? And if there's no increase of supply, even by a little bit, right? If only 2% right now is zoned for urban use, what if we just rezoned 0.5% more of the land that's available? It would increase the supply dramatically, and laws of economics, the prices would go down, maybe not forever, but it would definitely help, because right now, if you've been in Kona, especially Kona, there's areas on other parts of the island where there is a lot of vacant land available, not in areas that are necessarily extremely desirable to live in, but in Kona there is very little new building going on. There's very few new buildable lots being subdivided where you can build a home on, or just new tract developments of homes. So if that continues, supply will continue to stay the same, and the desire for people to live here, which we're never going to stop. We're never going to stop people wanting to come to a great place to live like Kona, and the population will continue to grow. We're going to continue to face increases in the price of housing. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Happy to have a discussion about it. Again, like and share the video if you want to spread this information around. Always appreciate you guys watching, and see you next week. Aloha.